Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take some of the hardest, most complex source material, the stuff that makes your brain ache just looking at the title, and distill it into clear, practical, essential knowledge for you. And to start, I want us to ground ourselves in something really simple, something immediate. Just mentally picture yourself walking through your own home. You stand up, maybe you take a few steps toward the kitchen. You walk around a coffee table. As you move, your entire visual field is changing, right? It's shifting radically. The couch looks different from this angle. The bookshelf seems wider. The light hits the wall in a completely new way. The geometry is in constant flux. But here's the question. How do you know, like instantaneously, without even thinking about it, that all those changing views are views of the exact same room, of one and the same object? Or think about a simple cube. How do you recognize it as a cube when you can only ever see 2 or 3 of its faces at once? You never see all 6 sides simultaneously. How's that unity held together in your perception?
That image, the body moving through a space that's both familiar and perpetually changing, that is the perfect way in. It's perfect because the sources we're grappling with today, they aren't interested in the brain as some kind of detached computer.
No.
We're diving into some key excerpts from Maurice Merleau-Ponty's monumental work, Phenomenology of Perception.
That's right. And our mission today is to really get our heads around Merleau-Ponty's central claim, which is, and this is not an exaggeration, truly radical. It flips the script on centuries of Western thought. So the executive thesis, the big idea for this whole deep dive is basically this. The body is not just an object in the world. It's the primary, pre-personal subject of perception. It's inherently rooted in a world that is this inexhaustible, open totality. And what that means is that any theory of the body schema is fundamentally a theory of perception itself.
And we should really pause on that because this isn't just, some esoteric philosophy for its own sake. Merleau-Ponty is trying to solve a massive historical dilemma. You have to think all the way back to Descartes.
The famous mind-body split.
Exactly. Descartes, who famously split all of existence into 2 completely separate buckets. You have the thinking substance, the res cogitans, which is the mind, and then you have the extended substance, res extensa, which is the external physical world. And for centuries after that, philosophy was basically just one long attempt to build a bridge across that gap. How does the immaterial mind connect to, and how does it know, the material world of objects?
Right, and the traditional answers to that were empiricism and intellectualism.
Yes, and they were the 2 main attempts to build that bridge. But Merleau-Ponty comes along, looks at both of them, and essentially says, you're both wrong. You're both wrong because you are ignoring the most fundamental fact of our existence, the body. This third mediating element, the place where we actually live our connection to the world.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Before Merleau-Ponty gives us his solution, this idea of the thinking body, we really have to understand why those 2 big schools of thought failed so badly. Why they couldn't even describe something as basic as seeing your own couch. Let's start with what you call the empiricist trap. The idea that perception is just a physical event. I mean, if you follow that line of thought, you're basically treating perception like, a game of billiards. One ball hits another.
That's a great way to put it. The critique is incredibly rigorous. Empiricism fails because it treats perception as just another physiological or physical event that happens within a world that's already completely made, already fully formed.
So the world is just there.
Exactly. The empiricist looks at human experience the way a chemist describes a chemical reaction or a zoologist describes fauna in the wild. They just break sensation down into these discrete, measurable units, a flash of light, a vibration of sound, a pressure on the skin.
And in that model, the subject, you, the person who's actually perceiving, you're just reduced to a system of sense organs.
Right.
Your eyes and ears are just biological instruments that receive stimuli from the outside world.
Precisely. Perception becomes nothing more than the causal end result of these external stimuli hitting those organs. It's all objective, it's predictable, and it can be fully explained by physics and biology. Or so they thought.
But there's a huge problem with that.
A massive one. The problem, as Merleau-Ponty points out, is that this objective thought, which is the whole foundation of empiricism, completely ignores the one element that is absolutely necessary for the world to appear in the first place.
The perceiving subject.
The perceiving subject. The moment the empiricist starts describing the fauna of a distant land or the light waves hitting a retina, he's completely unaware that he himself is perceiving all of this. He's trying to stand outside the world that he's describing.
And that's the crucial flaw, isn't it? That subjective gap in the picture. The source material has this amazing metaphor for it. It describes this subjective existence as the flaw or the gap in the great diamond of the world.
It's beautiful, yeah.
It says it's the surface of contact where the world ceaselessly assails and beleaguers subjectivity as waves wash around a wreck on the shore.
That's such a powerful, almost violent image. It suggests that being a perceiving subject isn't a peaceful state. It's a condition of constant beleaguering contact with an external world that you're stuck in.
It really is.
And it captures both the passivity of being acted upon and the rootedness of the body. Empiricism wants to describe the world as this seamless, ready-made diamond, fully transparent and measurable. But perception is the flaw in that diamond. It's a point of contingency where that world actually comes into existence for someone.
So all knowledge, then.
Yes, every piece of it. All knowledge, every abstract thought you have, every law of physics, every measurement we could possibly make, it all takes its place within the horizons that are first opened up by perception.
So you get stuck in a circle.
A vicious philosophical circle. If you try to explain perception using objective science, you're already presupposing the world that perception is supposed to be explaining in the first place.
Okay, so if I'm getting this right, you can't describe perception itself as just another observable fact in the world. Because to do that, you'd have to stand outside the world to describe it. Which is the very thing a subject can't do. You can never fill that gap because you are the gap through which the world appears.
That's it, exactly. Any attempt to objectify perception always presupposes the success of perception. It's fundamentally incoherent.
Okay. So empiricism fails because it just ignores the subject.
Yeah.
So intellectualism comes along and tries to fix this by swinging in the complete opposite direction.
Right.
It introduces this idea of a pure, universal subject. How does that approach, which is all about the thinking mind, also end up failing?
Right. So intellectualism moves past empiricism by bringing in what it calls the transcendental ego, this pure universal thinker, the I think. And this subject isn't a thing in the world. Rather, it actively constitutes the world. The world is reduced to being the correlative of thought. It only exists for this thinking agent.
On the face of it, that sounds like a much better solution. If I, the pure thinker, am the one constituting the world, then I can definitely explain how there's unity and order. So why does Merleau-Ponty reject this, too?
Because while the intellectualist correctly identifies the need for a constituting mind, the world they end up constructing is a world of concepts, not a world of lived experience. They solve the problem of unity, but they completely destroy the fact of perception.
What do you mean?
Well, if the ego perfectly constitutes the world in thought, why do we still have to perceive it? Why is the world displayed to us only gradually, bit by bit, and as the source says, never in its entirety?
Ah, that's the problem of gradual appearance. That makes sense. If I conceptualize a cube in my mind, I get all 6 sides at once, in a single pure thought. But when I actually look at a physical cube, I see one side, then 2, then I have to physically move to see the rest. Why are we stuck in that slow, unfinished process if our mind already has the perfect blueprint?
Exactly. Merleau-Ponty's critique is that the intellectualist treats the body as just another object within this conceptual system. It's secondary to the true I, the mind. And if that were true, it would be impossible to explain why we ever have the illusion, the actual lived experience that we saw with our eyes, what we in fact grasp through an inspection of the mind.
So that confusion, the feeling that I'm identified with my eyes, that should be impossible that my mind is truly separate and in charge.
It should be. The intellectualist creates this perfect blueprint of the world, a totally conceptual and complete structure. But we, as embodied subjects, are still stuck walking through the unfinished construction site, seeing one side of the cube at a time. They can explain the finished idea of the cube, but not the messy, ongoing experience of actually perceiving it.
So they can't explain why we're ever confused with our body, as the text says, or why the world is always presenting itself with its inherent ambiguity, never perfectly clear.
Precisely. So the conclusion of failure is really clear for both. Both empiricism and intellectualism give us a ready-made world, either one that's physically constituted or one that's conceptually constituted, and they both just leap right over the necessary ambiguity, the contingency, and the pre-personal reality of being in the world through a body that is neither a pure object nor a pure subject. They basically skip over existence itself.
Okay, so with both of those major schools of thought dismantled, we're ready for the new approach.
Right. And moving forward, what's so fascinating is that Merleau-Ponty realized that to get out of these philosophical traps, this dualism that led to all these failures, he needed new tools. Or at the very least, he needed new definitions for the old tools. The standard philosophical language, mind versus matter, just kept locking him back into the same false dilemmas.
So let's build that new lexicon. Let's start with the fundamental dichotomy that he completely rejects. In itself, en soi, and for itself, pour soi. The in itself is opaque being, right? Objects as they are, absolutely like that perfect ideal cube that's impossible for a human to actually see, but is theoretically perfect.
Right. And the for itself is the other extreme. Pure, transparent, non-spatial consciousness. The pure ego. Merleau-Ponty's whole argument is that true perception, real existence, happens in the messy middle ground between those two poles. We have to escape the choice between a finished product and a purely mental process, and the body is the escape route.
And that route is built on this core concept of the body schema, or in French, the corps propre. This term is absolutely critical, and we have to be really careful here because it is not the body as some measurable physiological object you'd find in a biology textbook.
No, absolutely not. The body schema is the implicit, expressive unity of yourself. It's your natural self. A better way to think of it is as your habitual orientation to the world. It's this background system of latent powers and potential movements. It's the thing that retains your sense of self as you move through space. It is the potentiality for the phenomenal field.
So it's the knowledge we have of our body simply because we are our body, not because we have one that we observe.
Exactly. And this connects directly back to your opening analogy of walking around the apartment. The unity of your apartment is grasped not because your mind is constantly calculating the new coordinates of the coffee table every time you move.
Right.
The unity is grasped because your body, your corps propre, retains its own identity and unity through those movements. The objects you see remain coherent because they are the correlate of your body's own pre-logical unity.
So the unity of the object is really just the unity of a task being performed by my body. That's a huge shift. And that leads us straight to the next term. Pre-personal consciousness. Because if the body is the primary subject, then consciousness can't always be that I think Descartes operating through deliberate conscious choice.
That's right. Pre-personal consciousness is the anonymous, already born background of our existence. Merleau-Ponty suggests that if we wanted to be really precise about the perceptual experience, we shouldn't say, I perceive. We should say, one perceives in me.
One perceives in me.
Yeah, it's consciousness functioning before any deliberate personal reflection kicks in. It's consciousness that's already saturated by the world, operating in the mode of the impersonal one.
So if perception is happening anonymously in me, does that mean our starting point in the world is always contingent? Something that's just a given, not something we chose?
It absolutely does. And that brings us to the concept of facticity. Facticity is the condition of being a finite subject that is thrown into the world, or as the source puts it, wrapped up in it. This means that the a priori, the stuff that must necessarily be true about our experience, isn't discovered through some abstract logical deduction. It's discovered as the fact understood.
So things like the fact that we perceive in space, or that our senses all work together, those aren't logical necessities. They're what?
They're simply formal expressions of a fundamental contingency. The fact that we are in the world as an already operating body. We don't deduce space. We wake up and find ourselves already spatially oriented. That's our facticity.
And this idea of being already oriented relies on the body acting as a single unified system. That brings us to the sensorium commune. And again, this isn't just a fancy term for the nervous system. It's about the body acting as a single unified receiver, integrating all the senses into one seamless system.
This integration is actually the proof that the body is the true subject of perception. Because think about it. If the senses were truly separate, like 5 little isolated islands in the mind, how could we ever perceive an intersensory world? How would we ever know that the redness of an apple and the hardness of the apple are properties of the same single object?
The evidence for this is actually pretty striking, isn't it? The source talks about synesthetic perception being the rule, not the exception, and that it's only scientific abstraction that forces us to forget this unity.
Yeah, they cite those incredible experiments with mescaline where the sound of a flute gives a bluish-green color or a metronome's tick is translated into spatially arranged gray patches. The senses are fundamentally linked. They speak the same language of style and existence. They're not isolated inputs.
Okay, so this unified, embodied approach to the world must change the definition of the object itself. Which brings us to the transcendence of the thing. This seems to be the answer to how an object can feel real and solid without being that perfect, finished idea of the intellectualist.
It is. The object is never fully possessed by us. It's perpetually receding. It's inexhaustible. Its reality is defined by two inseparable aspects.
Okay, what are they?
First, there is its ipseity. That's its unchallengeable presence, its concrete selfhood. This table is here. I can't just wish it away. But second, and just as important, is its perpetual absence, the way it always snatches itself away from our grasp. I can never see its back and its front at the same time.
It's like staring at a mountain. I know its presence, its obscenity is unchallengeable. It's just there, solid. But I can never, from one single viewpoint, possess the entire mountain, its far side, its hidden valleys. It always exceeds my grasp.
And that's what makes it real. The source explains it perfectly. If the thing itself were reached, it would be from that moment arrayed before us and stripped of its mystery. It would cease to exist as a thing at the very moment when we thought to possess it.
So its transcendence, its realness, is defined by it being the endpoint of an open series of experiences that can never actually be completed.
Exactly. And that dual nature, ipseity and absence, is precisely why the subject of perception has to be the body schema, with its open and limitless unity. The synthesis can't be a final state achieved by thought. It has to be a continuous process managed by an engaged, moving body.
So now we have this new lexicon. The body is corp propere, living in a state of facticity, perceiving with a unified sensorium commune. It all points to the conclusion that the body is the universal setting for perception. The synthesis of the world we see has to be located in the phenomenal body, not in some pure abstract ego.
And to really drive this home, Merleau-Ponty uses a marvelous example. Binocular vision. We have two separate eyes, right? They produce two separate retinal images, which somehow merge into a single unified object. How does that actually happen?
Well, the intellectuals would probably say that the mind just conceptually thinks the two images together.
Yeah.
But that doesn't account for the experience of it. You have to kind of wait for the unity to appear. You can physically feel the shift from double vision to a single object.
That's the key. The transition from double vision, what's called diplopia, to seeing a single object isn't achieved by the mind thinking them together. The single object appears when the two eyes stop functioning as individuals and are used as a single organ by one single gaze.
So the synthesis is an intentional act, like an aiming, but it's not a notional act, not a concept. It's managed by the body, pulling itself together to achieve a single goal of activity, a synergy.
Yes. And if that synthesis is managed by the body, drawing on its latent knowledge of itself, it explains why the perceived object always presents itself as transcendent, as out there in the world. The unity is affected on the object itself, in the world, not in some abstract point inside the thinking subject. The body is the very mechanism that generates the world's perceived objectivity.
Okay, so we've established that the body is doing the thinking, or maybe more accurately, it's doing the pre-personal synthesizing. This is where it gets really interesting, because now we get to apply that radical idea to the most fundamental elements of our reality: sensation, space, and time.
And to do that, we have to go directly to the crux of Merleau-Ponty's argument, his definition of sensation itself. He defines it not as just receiving data, but as a sympathetic relation. This is probably one of the densest paragraphs in the sources, but it is the absolute key to the whole system. Okay, the source states, the sensation of blue is not the knowledge or positing of a certain identifiable quale. It is, in all probability, intentional. But what it aims at is recognized only blindly through my body's familiarity with it. Sensation is intentional because I find that in the sensible a certain rhythm of existence is put forward, abduction or adduction, and that following up this hint and stealing into the form of existence which is thus suggested to me, I am brought into relation with an external being.
Okay, wow. Let's dedicate some serious time to translating that into something conversational, because that really does feel like the heart of the matter. So Merleau-Ponty is saying that when I sense the color blue, I am not intellectually identifying a fixed quality, a quale, the way a scientist would define a specific wavelength of light. It's not a detached analysis.
Not at all. Sensation is a sympathetic relation. The body has this latent knowledge, this deep familiarity with the world. The color blue is an invitation to adopt a rhythm of existence. Those terms he uses, abduction or adduction, they're physiological terms for movements opening up towards something or closing off and moving away from it. Blue isn't just a color, it's a way of being that the world offers you.
So if I see a really vibrant, intense blue, my body involuntarily responds to its rhythm. I might feel pulled toward it or opened up by it. I don't calculate its identity. I steal into the form of existence that's suggested by the color. Sensation is my body finding the right attitude, the right posture to meet that external being.
Think about the difference between knowing the definition of a heavy object and actually experiencing heaviness. When you instinctively brace yourself to lift a heavy box, even before your muscles fully engage, that bracing action is your body adopting the rhythm of existence suggested by the object. Sensation is the body setting a muddled problem for itself that it has to solve, finding the attitude that allows the blue to show up as blue.
The traffic light analogy from the source really helps here. When a traffic light turns red, the color red isn't just a wavelength of light or a set of objective facts. It radiates a rhythm of existence. It's a command to halt, to be contained, to stop the forward motion of your car and your body.
And your body reacts instantly and sympathetically through its familiarity with that situation without any conscious logical calculation. The color red has what the source calls a sacramental value, a meaning that your embodied subject adopts as its momentary law. It's the attitude required by the world at that moment. You don't analyze the light, your body finds the posture required to meet that light and its command.
And crucially, the body can only do this because it's already a repository stocked with natural powers. It's an anonymous activity. Merleau-Ponty has this amazing line about gazing at a vast blue sky. He says, "I abandon myself to it and plunge into this mystery that thinks itself within me. I am the sky itself as it is drawn together and unified."
It's incredible. The sensation is the world momentarily organizing itself through my body.
And this foundational bodily rooting extends immediately to our experience of space. So Merleau-Ponty argues against the two traditional views, that space is either an objective container that holds things, or that it's just a purely conceptual map in our minds. He argues for something called a spatial level.
Yes, and the spatial level is defined as a certain possession of the world by my body, a certain gearing of my body to the world. It's that feeling of equilibrium when the body's motor intentions and the perceived world join forces. It's not about measuring distance in feet or meters. It's about your potential for action.
And the best way to prove that spatial orientation is a bodily level and not a fixed physical fact or a mental calculation is by looking at those classic Stratton experiments. The subject wears glasses that invert their entire visual field, literally turning the world upside down.
Right, and initially it's total chaos. The subject can barely move. But slowly, over days or sometimes weeks, the visual world regains its upright position. The adaptation isn't immediate, which is the first proof that it isn't an intellectual process.
Because if it were intellectual, the subject would just think, okay, I know this is inverted, so I'll just reverse the signals in my head, and the problem would be solved instantly.
But the adaptation is slow, and it's profound. And Merleau-Ponty highlights this fascinating intermediate stage, the point where the subject reports feeling that their own body is upside down, while the landscape has finally regained its upright orientation.
That's the key moment. The world is only upright again because the body has adopted a kind of virtual body that's required by the spectacle. The body itself becomes the mechanism for correcting the inversion. So upright and inverted aren't fixed points in space. They're relationships that depend entirely upon the body's task and its situation. My body is wherever there is something to be done.
Exactly. So spatial orientation is constituted when my motor intentions and my perceptual field conclude a pact that gives things their direct, immediate power over my body. And the implication of this body-rooted space is just immense. It means that the condition for our very first perception being spatial is that it referred to some orientation that came before it.
Which means, as the text says, my personal existence must be the resumption of a pre-personal tradition. We are already at work in a world. We're born into an already oriented space because our body is inherently oriented from the start.
And this brings us to the dimension of depth. Merleau-Ponty calls depth the most existential dimension because it so clearly belongs to our perspective, to our point of view, and not to the objects themselves.
Traditional philosophy, like Berkeley's, always tried to reduce depth to just breadth seen from the side, what Merleau-Ponty calls God's view, or ubiquity. But that view, the detached, geometric bird's-eye view, is not how we live depth.
No. Lived depth is not a juxtaposition of simultaneous points like plotting coordinates on a graph. It's the thickness of a medium devoid of anything, and it's inherently temporal. It involves a temporal synthesis that links the present, the past, and the future.
Okay, how does depth relate to time? Is it that when I look down a long hallway, the far end is experienced as a potential future that I could walk into? The depth is a measure of the time I would need to traverse it?
That's exactly it. The body is fundamentally temporal. Subjectivity at the level of perception is temporality. The body doesn't just exist in time, it secretes time.
Secretes time. How does the body do that? That sounds very technical.
It does it by projecting around the present a double horizon of past and future. The unity of the things we see, the spatial synthesis, the object synthesis, all of it is based on this unfolding of time. When I focus on our coffee table, my body performs an act of looking that is simultaneously perspective. The object is the final stage of my focusing, and retrospective, it presents itself as having been there before its own appearance to me, before the stimulus.
So the table's experience as already having been there, even as I am in the process of defining it through my focus. It carries its past reality with it into the present moment.
But, and this is a crucial caution from the source, this synthesis is never fully realized. It constantly needs to be renewed. And why is that? Because perception is always operating in that impersonal mode of the one. The body's hold on time, the synthesis it creates, are themselves temporal phenomena that pass.
So our claim to objectivity, the idea of a stable, unchanging coffee table, is something that's constantly being remade and then disappointed. The object remains inexhaustible because time slips away just as fast as it catches up with itself. Perception, therefore, is constantly ratifying and renewing in us a prehistory.
And this brings us to the final, beautiful synthesis of this whole system, the world as style. The body is always seeking maximum visibility, maximum efficacy. And what this means is that the true shape and size of an object are not some kind of constant abstract laws. They're grounded in the self-evidence of the thing itself.
Okay, an example. If I am looking at a painting in a gallery, there's a specific spot on the floor where it just looks right, where it vouchsafes most of itself. Merleau-Ponty calls this the optimum distance or the culminating point. And that distance isn't a measurable size like 10 feet. It's a felt tension that fluctuates around a norm.
Exactly. An object is defined as big if my gaze or my body's motor intentions can't fully take it in. It's small if my body can do so easily. The real is defined as that environment where each moment is synonymous with them, where everything possesses a unique style.
That means the brittleness, the hardness, the transparency, and the crystal ring of a piece of glass all translate a single manner of being, a single style. The objective size of the object isn't some Kantian law. It's the culminating point of perception where my body's motor intentions and the phenomenon's own self-evidence finally align.
And because of this unified lived meaning, the thing is an intersensory entity. All of its sensory properties, visual, tactile, auditory, they all constitute one and the same style. The unity of the thing is that unique accent that you can find in each of its attributes.
This is where you can see the philosophical implications spilling right over into art. The source references the painter Cézanne, who tried to paint a landscape in such a way that the color alone signifies the texture, the weight, the light, and even the smell. He wasn't just painting what he saw intellectually. He was trying to paint the full intersensory experience, the style of the world.
And Merleau-Ponty says the significance of the thing inhabits that thing as the soul inhabits the body. It is not behind appearances. The meaning is inseparable from the very organization of its sensible aspects.
This perspective is also essential for understanding the cultural world. Things like roads, villages, tools, even social concepts. They aren't just neutral objects. They are molded to the human action that they serve. The cultural world is already present to us as an anonymous existence, an objective spirit that's just there, ready to be deciphered.
Right. When you see a hammer, you don't just see a piece of metal and a piece of wood. Your pre-personal body immediately understands it as a possibility for striking, as a whole system of potential movement. The cultural significance is compressed into the object itself, and it only requires a sympathetic reading from your embodied existence.
So that makes our relationship to the social world, just like our relationship to space, much deeper than any express perception or judgment. It's part of that pre-personal tradition that we inherit. It's a world that's already geared for human interaction.
But Merleau-Ponty ends this part on a note of caution. He reminds us that even if we try to dissolve that cultural layer, say, you focus intensely on a single paving stone in a Parisian sidewalk to see only color and light, the natural world is always capable of being discerned underlying that cultural layer. It's the foundation beneath the picture.
So, after all of that, what does this all mean? We started with this classic philosophical dilemma of mind and matter. And Merleau-Ponty resolves it not by picking a side, but by establishing the body, the corps propre, as this third genus of being, somewhere between a pure subject and a pure object. It is the ambiguous, historical, anonymous life that is constantly at grips with the world.
The body is the vehicle of our knowledge. It's what gives us our inherence in things, our entire understanding of the world, its history, its space, its objectivity. None of it is achieved by a detached mind thinking things together. It's achieved by this ambiguous embodied life. It's through this non-reflective, pre-personal unity that we find our true anchorage in reality.
And the true cogito, then, the foundational statement of existence, is radically transformed. It's not Descartes' I think, therefore I am, which is this intimate communing of thought with thought. The Merleau-Ponty cogito is the foundational knowledge that something shows itself, there is such a thing as a phenomenon.
And because the body mediates this entire relationship, our relationship with ourselves and with the world is strictly contemporary and rooted in ambiguity. I am never fully transparent to myself, and the world is never fully arrayed before me. We are always in the process of becoming, always partially hidden from ourselves.
That ambiguity is the fundamental truth. And if we follow this path, if we rediscover time beneath the subject, we can relate all the paradoxes we've talked about, the paradoxes of the body, the world, other people, to the single core paradox of time itself. The world only subsists by that unique action of consciousness that both separates and brings together the presented and the present.
And this leaves us with a final, really provocative thought, which is built directly on this complexity of the body secreting time. We learned that the body is defined by its ability to be present right here and right now, anchored in this specific room. But it's also present elsewhere and always, through its horizons of memory and anticipation. It's capable of that theoretical ubiquity where we can think ourselves into all places and all times.
But if we achieve that omnipresence, if we are in fact present here and now and simultaneously present elsewhere and always, Merleau-Ponty asks this a fundamental question. Does this very ambiguity, this boundless scope of a consciousness that is also so physically rooted, does it mean that we are fundamentally nowhere and at no time?
The challenge he leaves us with is to somehow reconcile the specific, concrete reality of the chair you are sitting in right now with the boundless, anonymous scope of your pre-personal consciousness. How do you live in that tension between being anchored in this single moment and being dispersed across an inexhaustible, open world?
We encourage you to explore what this pre-personal tradition means for your daily engagement with the world, especially the next time you walk around your apartment and recognize the cube on your bookshelf. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.